But if we could get started by each sharing our three speakers, maybe Davis go first. If you could just share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into more of the formal career conversation, talking about what roles you're doing today, but would love to know just a little more about each of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a Wallin scholar from 2012, graduated from Andover High School, and then went to the University of Minnesota, studied finance there at the Carlson School, and then graduated back in 2015. Since then, I have been working at RBC Wealth Management, kind of in the same role throughout the years, but just a different title here and there, a little bit different responsibilities, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. And then most recently gotten reconnected with Wallin. I'm on the Wallin alumni board. This is my first year, so I've been doing that for about 4.5 months. But that's been a great experience, and obviously we've had to shift some things with everything that's going on. All of our meetings being remote and everything like that. But a fun way to connect back and get involved with Wallin again.
Thank you. And how about Brady next?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right? Cool. So like Davis, I was a 2012 graduate from Andover High School, and we are twin brothers, if you couldn't tell already. So I went to the University of St. Thomas, just down the road from him at the U of M. I studied actuarial science, and if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a combination of risk management and statistics. So it's in the math department. So I, got a degree in actuarial science, and I worked as an actuary for about 3 years. And just about a year ago, I transitioned in kind of more of an economics role. So I'm now at Optum, which is part of United Health. So been there for a little over a year and really enjoying my time. So yeah, currently live in St. Paul with my wife, who's a school teacher, and yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Vanis. I originally from the Twin Cities, got my undergraduate at the University of Minnesota Carlson School, where I majored in marketing, and then found out halfway through that I really enjoyed more of the supply chain, kind of analytical side of the business. So I have a minor in supply chain and operations, and that's really where my career has been. So after I graduated, I joined 3M as in the sourcing department, and have had a bunch of roles since then. So I was counting the other day, and I've had 11 different jobs in 9 years since I've graduated in 2011. Had the opportunity to go over and live in Singapore for almost 3 years and work with the Asia Pacific operations. My most recent roles were back in the US, where I helped to integrate an acquisition that 3M had made from the sourcing and supply chain perspective. It was a fall protection business located in Red Wing, Minnesota. So now I'm back at 3M Center, right off of 94, the big buildings that show the Christmas tree in winter. And right now they have a heart lit up, kind of in support of all the COVID activities. So in that role, I'm managing a team of analysts within our sourcing organization who support analytical projects globally. So looking forward to talking with everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, all three of you, for introducing yourself. And why don't we start with talking about majors, since both Carolyn, you talked about changing majors, and I think Brady, it'll be enlightening as well to share a little bit about that non-traditional route into business from math and actuarial science. If you would each share how you decided on your major. Was it something you knew you wanted to do all along? Was it individuals that you met or classes you took along the way that helped encourage you or interest you in that space? I would love to hear from each of the three of you on that.
I can kick us off. So I started out thinking that I wanted to go into the business school because that had the most potential different roles that I could go into. Coming out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to commit to for the rest of my life. And so then kind of as I took more classes, marketing seemed really fun, interesting, kind of learning about consumer behavior. But it was really some of the supply chain classes that I took had to figure out the logistics of supply chains. So thinking about how you're moving materials around the world in order to feed production plants. Again, kind of those global supply chains, making sure that you have the right inventory levels, managing the cost of inventory. I kind of saw it as this big puzzle that I could improve and solve. And that was really fun and interesting to me. And then the more I took supply chain and operations classes, the more interested I got in kind of those supplier relationships, and ended up then going into a career in sourcing, where my job is to make sure that our relationships within 3M with our suppliers are managed in a way that's beneficial for both 3M and for the supplier. So making sure that 3M's getting the best value, the best cost of materials, making sure that our manufacturing plants have a steady supply of raw materials to continue to run the operations. And then a big thing recently with COVID has been reducing supply chain risk. So as you can imagine, a lot of our supply base has been impacted by shutdowns, either with, suppliers having people who have gotten sick and needing to shut down their operations, or being told by their local governments that they can't run their operations. So really a big focus recently is how do we diversify our supply base in order to manage that risk and have multiple options when we do experience issues with suppliers.
Excellent, thank you. And yeah, so Brady, Davis, and Carolyn, we tend to do these as just popcorn format, so please feel free. This is not formal. Mix up the order and just jump in as you have thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go next. Like Matt kind of said, I kind of had a career change and non-traditional path in college, I guess. When I went to college, I was always good at math, and I kind of liked business and wanted some sort of blend of the two of those, but didn't really know what to do. I kind of assumed it was either math or finance. And if you do math, you kind of have to go the route of a teacher. You do finance, you probably end up as an accountant, or, maybe doing what Davis does. So I didn't really know. And, I think a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds don't really know what they want to do right away, and that's fine. But I think one of my freshman year math classes, they had some seniors come in and share what actuarial science was. And I had never heard of it, to be honest. And once I kind of found out more about it, very, very high job placement rate, good starting salary, a lot of job security. There's actuaries in really every industry. I know personally, I have friends that I graduated with that work for governments. They work state and local governments. They work for health insurance companies. They work for life insurance annuity companies. They work for big, other insurance companies like Travelers or Progressive. Really all across the board. So there's a need for actuaries to manage financial risk and kind of do the supporting data behind the scenes. And I think midway through my freshman year of college, that seemed like an interesting job to me. Sounded like something I would be interested in. So I kind of pursued that route, decided to get that degree. Ended up working in that capacity as a retirement actuary, so essentially managing risk for pension plans. So if you think of the large companies around here are Target and 3M, General Mills are some of our clients. We would, as actuaries, have to do a lot of the math behind the scenes to make sure that they're putting enough money aside to pay out these pensions in 30, 40, 50 years. So that's where the actuary background of mine kind of got formed and came in. And after about 3 years of that, I decided I was ready for a change. I worked, really long hours and traveled quite a bit, which was a great first experience out of college, but was just looking for something that was a little less demanding. And that's kind of how I made the transition into an economics role. So I work very closely with the actuarial team at Optum now. I think 4 of the 12 members on my team are former actuaries. So we all kind of have that same mindset and similar skill capacity. So it's it's been an interesting transition, but definitely a good one.
And my route to finance, I would say, kind of started back in high school. I was lucky enough where our high school offered a couple of business classes to the high school students, which is kind of a side story, but I think all high schools nowadays should have, some sort of required financial education prior to getting into college. But I was lucky enough that Andover offered personal money management, entrepreneurship, I think a couple other classes as well. But those classes were kind of the first introduction for me to finance. And finance is such a broad field that when I got into college, I was like, oh, similar to Brady, I like math, I like numbers, but I didn't want to go the mathematics or statistics route or calculus or anything like that. So I said, oh, I'll kind of go with business. I have some older brothers that were in accounting, marketing. My dad's a computer programmer, so I was kind of always around that businessy type of talk, if you will. Got to college and was required to take, a couple of general classes, and said I'm going to take finance and accounting. I got in and absolutely hated my first accounting class. Absolutely hated it, and said that is not for me. I'm done with accounting. So finance it is, and I just kind of fell in love with some of the basics that we were learning. Not all my finance classes were my favorites or great, but it was something that piqued my interest. So I just kind of took that and ran with it, and led to an internship and ultimately a job. And 5 years later, I'm still here and still enjoying it. So
that's great. And just continuing on, you talked about struggling in one of the courses. What insights would you have when each of you basically talked about being interested in majors or kind of identifying where you want to go? What happens then when you struggle in that first class?
I think just kind of continuing on with my accounting class, for instance, high school was, I don't want to say high school classes were, they weren't easy or anything like that, but I think college was a really big shift in the difficulty. And that was something that I noticed for the first time, where I was struggling to, if I got an A-, that wasn't, anything to really be too concerned about back in high school. But in college, I was, struggling to get a B. And that to me was a big shock. But really my takeaway was that was the first time I actually had to go to the professor and seek help from teachers' assistants, and really put in the work outside of class. I think that was my biggest learning curve, is learning where to go if I had questions, and really just not be afraid to ask for help. I think that was the biggest hurdle for me.
Thank you.
And I would actually second that. I know, once I got to kind of those third and fourth year classes, especially the higher level statistics and probability ones, where it's very theoretical and not so much just doing problems on a piece of paper. That's where I really ran into some issues in college, and not being afraid to go to office hours and ask for help. I think in high school, I never had that need. Kind of like Davis said, not breezed through high school, but you really didn't have to put in a ton of extra work. Whereas in college, it was that humbling experience of having to walk into a professor's office after, maybe getting a C on a test, or, having a couple back-to-back tests where you underperformed what you thought you should have. So I think having that realization that, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to struggle in some of those higher level classes, especially if that's what you want to do with your career and that's the route you want to go. You should really take pride in learning that and not being afraid to ask.
Yeah, I would second what Davis and Brady both said. Is I worked hard in high school, but when I got to college that first semester, I was not doing anywhere near as well as I expected. And it was humbling, and it made me question, am I in the right place? Should I be here? But you figure it out. You put in the work and you kind of double down, and know that, just because a class was hard for you doesn't mean that you don't have the capability to do it or to learn it. And also, if you are struggling, to think about, are you enjoying kind of the underlying idea of what's being taught? Because candidly, whether or not you can memorize that equation or remember the definition of a Gantt chart, or, like those technical things that you learn in school are important for building that base knowledge. But when you actually are kind of like out in your job, the important thing is, are you enjoying your work and finding fulfillment in your work? And I think you can kind of get the gist of whether or not you like a subject, and excelling it in each and every class isn't going to be as important, and isn't important at all in the long run, and compared to making sure that you're in a profession or industry that you're enjoying.
I love all the advice between sharing about seeking out other resources. You each have shared about having that like growth learning mindset, continuing to build skills because that will be relevant in whatever we all want to do with our professions. So you're in school, you've decided what major you're going to pursue, you're continuing to seek out resources. How do you then pursue that real world, your first job? How did you look for internships and work experiences while you're a student?
When I was at the U of M, and Carolyn, maybe you can speak to this as well a little bit, but I think Carlson had some very, very good resources available to students. Admittedly, I did not take advantage of all of them that I should have, or to the extent that I should have. Little things such as practice interviews. I mean, they would have people on staff, or volunteers from companies, General Mills or somebody would come in and they would have actual HR representatives there, and they would put you through a mock interview, and they would critique you afterwards. You could film the interview if you wanted, and they just give you honest feedback to help you. I didn't really take advantage of that, and I should have. I did take advantage of a lot of the resume building opportunities that they had, where you would come in with your resume and somebody would sit down with you for a half hour and just tear it apart and just tell you, not in a mean way, but in a constructive way. So that to me was a resource I wish I would have taken advantage of more thoroughly. But I feel like I did get a lot out of the resources that Carlson had. They had a lot of career fairs. You really go out and you see a lot of the jobs that are available for a 22-year-old coming out of college. My internship was a little bit more, it wasn't your boilerplate, internship program. I feel like that a lot of students do have, which are incredible opportunities. Our company still has one today. I did not participate in those. My internship was a little bit more off the beaten path, and I got it because my older roommate at the time, he was leaving to study abroad, and he was an intern at RBC. And he said, "Hey, I think this might be a good fit for you. You should go check it out." So I applied, interviewed, and absolutely loved it, and fell in love with the people I was working with there. And I'm still working with them to this day. So it was just kind of a weird situation how I ended up there. So I never went through a full formal, 40-hour-a-week internship program for the entire summer. I know a lot of my classmates did, and that's something Carlson is really known for. So I feel like I guess I had a little bit different experience than a typical Carlson student. But I mean, my internship was incredible. Still have great relationships with everybody who was involved with my time as an intern, and even to this day as a full-time employee.
Yeah, I can build on that a little bit. And apologies if I'm talking kind of loud. My neighbor just decided to start mowing their yard. So there's a little bit of background noise. But it's kind of interesting, kind of building off what Davis said. I'm now on the recruiting side of things. So I recruit at the University of Minnesota and largely out of the Carlson School for 3M. And it's absolutely incredible that probably half of the people that we bring in on my team have started talking with us since they were freshmen or sophomores. So even if they weren't ready to be, to take on that full-time job, or even if, we usually look for juniors for our internships, but as freshmen and sophomores, a lot of these people are coming and talking to us and learning about the jobs. And we absolutely remember that from year to year. And so if there's a company that you're interested in, it really does help to start building those relationships early and then keep them up, over the years as best you can, just by sending a quick note or sharing an interesting article. All of that is kind of that standard advice, but being on the recruiting side of it, it really makes a difference. When we want to bring people onto the team who are excited about the company and have expressed interest over a long period of time. So that would be my advice if you have a couple companies that you're targeting.
And I would definitely second what the two of you had said. The resume sessions, the mock interviews are all great things. I was involved in the math club at St. Thomas, and what they did was occasionally they'd bring back young alumni, so people who graduated 1 to 5 years before, and come back and sit down. They'd order pizza and bring a bunch of drinks and snacks and stuff, and sit down for 2 hours, and they'd walk by, look at your resume, just talk to people. They had a few volunteers go up and do mock interviews, and then everybody else would get to critique them. I was never brave enough to do that, but you definitely learn a lot watching some of your classmates go up there and just bomb some mock interviews. But I would really encourage you to do that. I think just even watching somebody else do that, you really learn a lot of things about your mannerisms, how you speak, how you would answer questions. And I found that to be very beneficial. So I think my freshman and sophomore year, I did those. Also did the resume session. And I've actually come back and been on the other side of things where I get to do the interviewing and the grilling for some of the current students, which is always fun. Another thing I would recommend is career fairs. Like Carolyn mentioned, going early, you can leave a lasting impression. And I went as a freshman and a sophomore, even though a lot of places were looking for juniors for their internships. And I had, those second, third year, that I went, I had people that still remembered me. And, I remember the first time going, I didn't have a car on campus. My dad had to come pick me up during his lunch hour and go drop me off at the career fair. And I had to stretch to get my resume to about half a page. And looking back on it now, I mean, I'm very glad I did it. It was, I was awkward 18-year-old bumbling through, some interactions with people and trying to figure out how to hand off my resume that was a third of a page. And it was a very good experience for me, though. I think, like I said, some people remembered me the following year. Makes things a lot easier to pick up a conversation. Just even to get a list of contacts, companies, people that you may end up wanting to reach out to down the road. So if you could do any of a combination of those things, the resume sessions, the mock interviews, and attending career fairs early and often, I would recommend doing all of those.
I love all the advice about taking initiative. You each have talked about whether it was bombing mock interviews or getting resumes torn apart. Do you mind sharing a little more of just that, like going into an activity when it's not going to be perfect? I think so much of our fear or hesitancy of starting is just not knowing where it will go. And so how did each of you take those steps?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that sticks out to me is I think, like I said, after my freshman year, I did get a couple of phone interviews, and not quite sure how. I didn't have much on my resume, and I, was kind of an awkward 18-year-old that didn't really know what I was going to major in at that point, and thought it was maybe math, so I just kind of signed up for some things. And I remember distinctly those first couple interviews, I was not prepared at all. I didn't know what to do, really. There were questions where I didn't have an answer for. They asked me about certain experiences, or, tell me about a time when you overcame a challenge, or things like that. And I just kind of stumbled through 25 minutes of an interview, and, I remember hanging up and thinking, well, that did not go well. And, there's no way that I'll get a call back from that. But I think, knowing that it was a bad experience, it just prepared me for the second time around. That next year when I was looking for internships and job offers and everything else, I was a lot more prepared for the questions they were going to ask. I was a lot more comfortable speaking on the phone. That was something that, even if an interview goes poorly, always try and find something that you can take advantage of. Or even if a career fair goes poorly, like I said, where you don't really have a lot on your resume, try to find some positive out of it, whether you get a couple business cards, you throw them into a spreadsheet and just kind of keep a running list of people that you met, maybe a few notes about them, their contact information. Even if you think there's no hope and, you're not going to get an internship or a job offer right away, at least try and get something out of it.
I would say that the more you do something, the more comfortable you get with it, right? So go into it knowing that it's not going to be perfect and that you're going to probably make mistakes, and that's okay, and have a sense of humor about it. The more you try something, the better you're going to get, and not succeeding, it builds resiliency, right? And that's going to, again, serve you well later on. And everyone on this call has a super long runway for your career and all of your opportunities that are going to be coming to you. So if you don't get that dream internship your sophomore year, or, struggle to get, where you want, it's just one small step on your career path. And I know that things can seem like a really big deal in the moment, but you're going to get through it, you're going to learn, and you'll just apply that experience to the next one. So I'd say don't stress out about things. I know that's something I'm always like rethinking things in my head. How could I have done it differently better? And that's okay. But once you've kind of taken that learning, apply it and move on.
I had a couple of horror stories from interviews that stuck with me for a little bit, but to both of their points, I think you just gotta, get some thick skin and keep moving on. And one of them I vividly remember, I was kind of on the second round of an interview, and they had said, "Oh, great, we want to have another phone call with you. Does this date work?" And I had told them no because I had a math test, and it was, a accounting test, and it was a class that I was really struggling in. And looking back, it's like, this is a company that's willing or ready to offer me an internship, and I basically told them, no, I gotta take an accounting test. So looking back, that was a terrible mistake, but something that I learned from. I had another interview where they quizzed me kind of on the history of the company. They said, what company did we merge with back in 1997? And I had no idea. So you just kind of I was just honest with them and never want to lie and put out the incorrect image out there or anything like that. But I just said, I really don't know. And then kind of the last takeaway here from my interview horror stories would be, when I was interviewing at RBC, I came in looking to interview for one internship, and they simultaneously interviewed me for another one. So I kind of, at the end of the day, I got the offer for both of them, and they let me decide which one I wanted. But it's kind of funny looking back. I work in finance right now, and they had asked me for one of the internships that was in the mutual fund department at RBC. And they said, can you tell us what a closed-end mutual fund is? And I had no idea. And I was honest. I said, I really could not tell you, but I'm here and I want to learn, and I'm willing to ask questions. And I think that really showed through my lack of knowledge, right? I was to Brady's point, I was an 18-year-old college student looking for an internship. And I knew I was interested in this field. I just didn't have the base knowledge. So I think I just tried to portray that as best I could and just say, look, I don't have all the knowledge, but I want to be here. I want to learn, and I'm willing to ask questions. And I think that's said a lot and ultimately ended up with a couple of internship offers. So hopefully you guys can learn from a couple of those mistakes. But
yeah, and really building off, Davis, what you're saying, the importance of asking questions. We want to make sure we're hearing from all the students. So if you have specific questions from any of our panelists, please type them into the chat bar or unmute yourself and feel free to ask the question. And so as those come in, we'll make sure to get those answered. But building off the last thing that we talked about was preparing for experiences. I heard a lot about, even when you didn't have the best experience, you were taking something out of it and making the best out of a situation. How can we be doing that during COVID, when maybe the economy might be looking a little more bleak and it might be a little more difficult to find a summer internship? What can students be doing to still be gaining positive experiences and being productive during COVID?
I guess I can kick this one off. I know for me, I personally, in the position that I'm in now, we are really reliant on coding. So I know if you go out online, and I'm not sure if a lot of college courses are requiring these, or certain majors are requiring, a basic level programming class. But we get emails every week at work saying, SQL online e-learning classes are now free for the next 90 days. Or I recently started learning Tableau, which is kind of a really cool data visualization tool. I started it about 6 months ago, and I got an email just last week saying Tableau has a 90-day free trial on all of their basic learning software. So I downloaded that, and last week I had some downtime at work between meetings and plowed through a class for an hour. I would say learning certain skills like that. I know Excel is obviously a big one. personally, I thought I was an expert in it when I left college, and I learned more in probably the first week than I did in 4 years of college. You start learning lots of different shortcuts, different features, and learning to write your own macros and do other things like that were way over my head in college. So I would say taking advantage of this time between filling out job applications. I've heard through LinkedIn that there's a lot of places that are doing free resume sessions now, free mock interviews, things like that, or practice phone interviews. So if you can take advantage of a lot of those things, if you know that the field that you want to be in and some of the skills that might be necessary for it, just Google free XYZ classes online. And I think a lot of places are coming around to the current environment and offering those for free.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation. There's so many tools out there that you can take advantage of. And when we're doing recruiting, if people have a really strong foundation in Excel, that goes a long way. They're able to hit the ground running. So I think take some of those more advanced Excel classes, at least in my industry, is going to serve you well long term. And other than that, I mean, if you're comfortable, there's volunteer opportunities, or even reaching out to some of your industry contacts, and saying, hey, is there opportunities for me to learn, or is your company putting on any webinars, or just kind of keeping those connections strong is another way to make sure that you're going to be top of mind when things do turn around.
I think the webinars that Carolyn touched on are great. I think our company's offering some of them that may be a little high depth or too in depth for just an average listener. But I think those are great. I would say the only thing in addition to what Brady and Carolyn have said is just read up on current events. If there's a job that you are interested in or a field that you're interested in, read up on it. I think this is a great opportunity for you to get that base knowledge and get educated on, hey, what changes is this industry going to make in response to COVID? And then how might I fit into that as a prospective employee? I think that would just make yourself a little bit more polished going into an interview when everything starts to shake out.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And I know it's a big topic that's affecting us all in very different ways. So I love the idea of continuing to learn skills. So important. So with that said, what are the aspects of the work world that you feel that college did not prepare you for, or that you did not expect coming out of college?
I think when I was in college, the U of M did a very good job, or it was my classes my professor did a very good job of getting you ready to work in teams. I mean, every group project that I can think of, or excuse me, every project that we did was a group project. Rarely did we do something on our own. So I think going into the workforce, I was prepared to work with a group, right? Work with people of different backgrounds, different education levels, different expertise, different skills. The thing that I feel like I did not get prepared for was something that's kind of specific to my job. But in working in financial planning and financial advising, a lot of what we do, I do work for a large company, but at the end of the day, I view the person I'm responsible to as being the client, the investor. So when you're dealing with somebody else's money, right? This is their livelihood, this is their nest egg, their retirement. That puts a different spin on it that college doesn't really teach you, right? They don't really teach you how to handle a phone call from a client when the stock market's shifting 3%, each day. So I think that was something that I just kind of had to learn on the fly. And I think the running joke in our office is there is no training manual. I mean, we had a client unfortunately pass away earlier this year. How to deal with his family in terms of managing the estate and just moving forward and just kind of reassuring them, hey, everything's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. So I think little situations like that, you can't learn from a textbook. And a college professor isn't going to teach that to a classroom of 45 students. So I think that's something you just unfortunately have to learn on the go. And I think, given our current environment, I think there's a lot of that going on in every industry. I think every industry has been shooken up in some way, shape, or form. So I think this is a good opportunity. You just got to be resilient and just be flexible.
One thing that college didn't prepare me for, but which I absolutely love, is being able to kind of take initiative and take ownership of your responsibilities and of your career. And so in school, like you get assignments and you get, clear deliverables about what's expected of you. Oftentimes, in my career, very rarely has my manager, my organization said, these are the steps you're going to take. This is what we need you to do. It's much more open-ended than that. It's, hey, here's your this is what you need to manage. Go figure out how to do it. So there's a lot more initiative that I needed to quickly take in order to do my job, whether that was going out asking questions, trying to learn on my own, and then really trying to decide, like, how do I think this should be done? How will this category be managed the best? What do I think is the next big thing in this space? And just being much more proactive about my role in my career than I was ever expected to be in college. And that has been really fun because you get to shape your own destiny. You get to bring your own ideas to the table. So I mean, don't just, when you're in your internship or in your first role, don't just wait to be told what to do. Bring ideas forward. Say, this is what I think should be done, and why. And then I guarantee you, the vast majority of the time, your leadership will say, all right, go for it.
And I will absolutely second what Carolyn just said about the open-endedness of work requests and projects. That's something I definitely was not prepared for. But I really enjoy. You do get to be initiative, or you get to show initiative, be creative. I think another thing comes to mind is, I know Davis had mentioned working in groups in college when he was at the U of M. I had to do that quite a bit at St. Thomas too, but I felt that in college it was easy enough to just say, I know I'm with a couple people in my group who are not going to pull their own weight. I can just pull their weight for them. You can get away with that in college. In the workforce, you really can't. There's only so many hours in a day, and you have to genuinely trust that the people that you're working with are going to pull their own weight. So that's something that once I got, to a real work environment, and you really do have to put the trust in your coworkers and know that they're going to pull their end of the bargain. And, the success of the team depends on that. So in college, I think I was very much one to just, if you get placed with somebody or you get to pick your own group and you want to be with your friends, but they're not going to pull their own weight, you can kind of carry the group. And it's a lot tougher to do that in the workplace.
Let me unmute myself before I start talking to myself. One of the questions we got was, at what year or did you really start focusing on building your resume and like delving into career development, both as an underclassman and then as you were in your junior, senior year?
I would say for me, I think my sophomore year was the biggest thing. I started volunteering a lot more. I played baseball all throughout college, so it was a little bit more difficult for me to find time to have a part-time job and to do some of those volunteer things. But I tried to make the best of it and squeeze out every hour of the day that I could. So I had a part-time job. I volunteered, and I was also in the math club. I tried to do all the volunteer outings that they could. Anything that could show a leadership position, or maybe not my sophomore year having a leadership position, but getting my foot in the door with a couple of different groups, so that down the road, my junior year, I could move into that leadership position. I would say just broaden your horizons. Just because you sign up for emails or go to a couple meetings at a club doesn't mean you have to commit your entire life to them. You'll get some opportunities to meet a few other people that, maybe would be good contacts down the road. And at the very least, you have something to talk about when your resume is only half a page like mine was. So I think just your sophomore year, trying to kind of put a lot of feelers out, try and see which groups you're interested in. If there's a certain cause you want to volunteer for, if there's a certain job that you can do part-time that's really interesting to you, try and find something like that to do. Maybe you want to be a tutor at the math center. I know there's a lot of my friends and former classmates that did that. That's relevant. It's a little bit of money in their pocket, and it's something that they can talk about on a resume and in an interview.
And I would encourage you, don't just do things to build your resume, right? Like, your time's really valuable. So join a club that you're interested in, or, spend that initiative on things that you care about. Like, for example, I didn't join a lot of clubs my freshman and sophomore year, but my grandfather had passed away from cancer when I was a sophomore. So I got really passionate about colleges against cancer and got very involved in that my junior year. A lot of what I spoke to in job interviews was with my summer job, where I was a sailing instructor on one of the lakes in Minneapolis. And in that role, there were things that I had done, even though it was basic summer job, that I was able to speak to, that I improved. Like I implemented a new curriculum for the course, and I took a leadership role within that. So even in your existing jobs, there's certainly opportunity to kind of to continue to grow and learn and speak to those experiences when you are interviewing, or in your personal life as well. If you have things going on in your family that require you to take initiative, to be a leader, it's absolutely okay to speak to that. It's good.
I graduated college in actually 3 years, so I was kind of on a little bit more of a press schedule. I felt like I felt a little rushed, as my second year, my sophomore year rolled around, compared to all my colleagues, my coworkers and students that already had a full year or full internship behind them. So I think I kind of looked at it and said, I just need to broaden my horizons and, to Carolyn's point, find something I'm interested in, something I'm passionate about. So I had, throughout all 3 of my years at school, I had 3 different jobs. I think I had 2 jobs at all times. And then for about a year in there, right in the middle, I did have 3 jobs on campus going on at once. So I had, I guess, 2 jobs on campus. One was my internship at RBC. But just taking this step further, I think finding a leadership position or something that you might be able to, that gets you out of your comfort zone a little bit, but it also taught me a lot, was working for the Big Ten Network. So I had my internship at RBC. I was working at the on-campus rec center, and then the Big Ten Network. I had no experience, or I shouldn't have been doing any sort of film production or anything like that, but I was a big sports fan, and then had a connection that said, hey, come check out this, you might like this job. And then fast forward a couple months, and I was kind of the lead producer for one of the women's hockey teams. And that was just such a cool experience. And I look back so fondly on that. But that was something that I talked about probably more than my RBC internship during interviews. I think that was something that was really valuable, and something to this day I still look back on and have great memories of.
I love that advice of really not just focusing on your resume, but focusing on things you're interested in. And then it sounds like you each really took a deep interest and took a leadership role when you were doing that, and getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, I think that's something does not need, or could continually be reiterated. I know to myself that I know we all get comfortable, and so the more we can do that, really builds ourselves. So we just got a question in. What does a typical day in your job look like?
My job, I guess, it does kind of revolve around investment and doing financial planning, and the stock market has definitive hours. It's 8:30 Central Time to 3 p.m. Central Time. So I typically get into the office around 7 o'clock, and I stick around till 4 o'clock. But 7 until the stock market opens at 8:30 is usually just kind of preparation for the day. I don't have any of my own clients. I do work with financial advisors that have their own clients. So a lot of it is preparing for any meetings that they may have or any phone calls that they may have. If we have a client that maybe has a change in their circumstance, whether it's a marriage, a divorce, they sold a business, getting ready to retire, there may be some things that kind of go along with that change that we may need to look at. For instance, we may need to review their portfolio. May need to work with their attorney and review some estate documents, that kind of a thing. But really, I think aside from the 7 o'clock until 8:30 preparation, anything that happens from 8:30 to 3 o'clock is a total random offshoot. It depends on who calls, which of our clients call, what they're looking for that day. Just again, if anybody's following the stock market, kind of the volatility that we've seen the past 2 or 3 months has really made it a pretty stressful time at the office. So, outside of the 7 to 8:30 window, I think, and every day is different, and that's what draws me to my job. That's why I like it so much. It keeps me on my toes and keeps me learning, and it's fun. So.
And so just following up quick, would you say it ends up being more of those client interactions or more preparing, reading up on information for, interacting with others?
That's a good question. It's a very good mix of both. It's a healthy mix of both. There is some administrative duties to my job, but aside from that, it's a really good mix of spending time on the phone or just doing some legwork, getting ready for the next meeting or that week's meeting, the next week's meeting. So it's a good mix.
All right, Matt, do you want pre-COVID or post-COVID, what this looks like?
That's a great question. Let's hear it all.
All right. Well, so my hours haven't changed that much. It's just been nice because I haven't had to commute into the office, but I'm not a morning person. So normally I would roll in around 8 a.m., usually stay until around 5:30. And then, so I've got actually 2 roles within 3M. Part of my job is managing 6 sourcing analysts who are all, within 2 years of being out of school. And then my other job is managing the global supply of paper that 3M purchases. So I have a really interesting mix of coaching and working with my team to make sure that they're getting the career development that they need. I have weekly one-on-ones with each of them. So a lot of working with them and helping them to have a positive experience learning. But on the paper side, it can change from day to day. So a lot of my interactions will be working with our manufacturing plant colleagues. So supply chain analysts who are actually located in the plant, who are trying to forecast the demand and how that translates into how much material they should buy to keep their production lines running. So working with them and helping them to craft a message to our supply base to kind of navigate this. And as you can imagine, with our demand in a lot of areas has completely dropped off. In other areas, it's absolutely surged. So one thing that has been unexpected in all of this is the demand for blue painter's tape is off the charts, unprecedented. Can you imagine why? People are at home and looking around and ready to, do some home improvement projects. So we can't keep blue painter's tape on the shelf. So working then to try and work with our supply base to ramp up production quickly, make sure that we have material to meet that demand. Then on the flip side, you think of an industry like dentistry. So 3M provides a lot of product into the dental industry. If people can't go in and see their dentist, the dentists aren't going to be using our products. So demand has absolutely dropped off in that area. And maybe 3M had orders in place that we'd already committed to, but now we don't need. So then it's negotiating with our suppliers to either have them hold that inventory or slow down our estimated consumption of it. So a lot of those type of conversations of working with division partners to understand what the situation is, and then kind of being that conduit, communicate back to the suppliers, potentially renegotiate contracts and product pricing. So really interesting and dynamic. And one of the cool things about working with 3M is that the company is in so many different industries. On any given day, I can work on a project that's, a plant that's manufacturing reflective road striping that does the yellow dotted lines down our highways, or the back of Tegaderm bandages that you would get if you're in the hospital, or command hooks. So all of those things I've worked with our divisions on in the past couple days. So it's very interesting. You can have a plan for the day, but rarely does it actually play out the way you expect because there's so many moving parts. And that's just been escalated with COVID. But even before this all happened, there's a lot of change that happens every day. You think of like weather events, like hurricanes coming in that decimate the ability for materials to get out of a certain geographic area for a matter of weeks. You have to then kind of quickly scramble to figure out how to work around that. So yeah, it's an adventure every day, and it keeps it fun.
I would say for me, like Carolyn said, definitely changed, pre-COVID and post-COVID. But I guess a little bit of background on what I actually do now is, if you have United Health for Medicare insurance, if you're over 65, or if your spouse is over 65, you're eligible for what we call an in-home visit every year, or what we call a house call, where a nurse will come to your home and do a 45 to 60-minute assessment, basically looking at your medicine cabinet, making sure your prescriptions are filled, doing a lot of mobility tests, checking your blood pressure, your eyesight, things like that. So we have about 3,000 nurses that do these. On any given day, there's about 2 million visits that they perform in a year. My team does house call analytics. So we do any sort of statistics that you could possibly think about for these nurses. So we're figuring out how far nurses are driving on an average day, how long their average visit is, do they have high rates of capturing all of these diseases. So there's hundreds and hundreds of diseases that we monitor. It's any sort of thing from left pinky toe amputation to glaucoma to hearing issues. Anything that you can think about, these nurses go into a home and they're trying to catch. We are aggregating that data and we are trying to summarize it. So the easiest way I like to describe it is, I'm a big baseball fan. Statistics are a very, very big part of that. I do that, but for nurses. So we're trying to figure out which nurses did very well last month, which nurses are doing well in senior homes or long-term care facilities, which nurses are, is there a correlation between a nurse driving further between visits and capturing, hyperlipidemia or colorectal cancer, random things like that. So we work closely with a lot of nurses and doctors who want certain check-ins, and they'll say, hey, I'm riding along with this nurse tomorrow. I would like a full report on what he or she has done the last 3 months. So, I'll get in the office and I'll get a call, or at home, I guess now, but I'll get a call from a doctor who's saying, I'm riding along with this nurse on Wednesday and I want a full report of last 3 months visits for her. So that's a lot of what I'll do. We do standard reporting. So every month we'll give all the clinical managers for each of the 8 regions, we'll give them updates on their, I guess, best and worst performing nurses. We do a lot of things where we recommend certain nurses for additional education programs. If they have really low rates of catching certain diseases, we'll nominate them for certain processes like that. But day to day, it's, making sure our data sources are being refreshed correctly. So a lot of the nurses are traveling and they just have an iPad when they go into a home and they're, typing in everything, or they're doing a lot of drop down boxes and things like that. So day to day, I'm making sure that our data sources are being refreshed, making sure that the visit counts seem reasonable from what we would expect. And then just kind of doing a lot of ad hoc projects. For example, last week we got a call that they're looking to expand this to a couple rural counties in North Carolina. So they called us and asked if we could find a couple similar counties that were, demographically similar. So what we could expect as a potential yield or return for these nurses. So it's kind of assisting some of the teams on RFPs where they're trying to go out and get new business. So they'll reach out to us and say, if we go to this county, what can we expect for a return and how many diseases are we going to find? Yeah.
That's great. And so it sounds like all 3 of you are dealing with ambiguity, changing circumstances on a daily basis. So very responsive, adaptive. but all the while really strong in communicating and that whole relationship management piece. We have just 5 minutes left. One of the questions came in if there was a need for professional certifications in any of your fields, and if that was something you did in college or since you've been out in the workforce. Would love to hear on that. And then also, our final question is, what advice would you give yourself in college, looking back?
I can kick this off here. I guess in my current position, in kind of the economics role that I'm in, there are no certifications. Some people do some classes to get certified in certain coding languages, but it's definitely not a requirement at all. In my first career as an actuary, there definitely are a lot of certifications with that. So if you're not familiar, there's a process similar to kind of the CPA exams, except instead of 4 exams, there's between 10 and 14, depending on the field that you're in. So I started out in retirement, and I was actually on that 14 exam track. So it's a process that's it takes a very long time, typically 6 to 8 years after college. So a lot of people are close to 28, 29, 30 when they're wrapping up their exams, and they're I guess an official actuary at that point. That was part of the draw for me to kind of move out of that career. Was I got through 4 of them and decided that instead of staring down another 6 years of these exams, I wanted to make that switch out. So if you go the actuarial route, there's definitely a lot of certifications that you would have to do in exams. The exams typically are 300 to 400 hours of studying per exam. So take that with a grain of salt. I think some people can try and sneak by with about 250 hours of studying. I was more on the latter side of needing closer to 350 or 400 to pass an exam. But that definitely takes up a lot of time. And I guess I'll wrap up by saying, advice to my college self is, don't get so worked up about what you're majoring in. I know there's a lot of stress behind that, and there's a lot of labels assigned to that. And I think, I talked to Davis about this just a couple weeks ago that, I've worked with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. The gal that I sit next to when I'm in the office actually has a Spanish degree. And, she's very, very good at her job. She's one of the best on our team at it. When I worked as an actuary, we had 2 guys that one of them was an airline pilot and the other was a chemist prior to taking his actuarial exams and starting along that career. So I would say don't put too much stock into, what you're going to major in, and don't think that that's what you're going to be stuck in for the rest of your life. There's a lot of opportunities to transition out of it. You're not going to be stuck in that if you don't want to for the rest of your life. So, I'm a testament to that. I, stressed a lot my sophomore year and into my junior year about what I was going to study and what I was going to major in. And, after 3 years, you have new interests. You realize that you want to try something new with your life, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, I completely second that. There's so much opportunity to change careers multiple times, to try different industries. So, and even, in terms of your grade point, that's important for that first role. People look at it, but after that, for their second job and your third job, and 10, 15 years down the line, no one looks at GPA. So once you're in a role, it's really your hard work and your initiative that's going to shape your career, much more so than your college or the specific classes that you took. So I would say I agree with Brady 100%. Don't stress out about it. Things work out. In terms of the first part of the question, there's not any required certificates in supply chain operations or sourcing. There's a series of trainings and classes that you can take called the APICs, which just help build your knowledge base, but they're certainly not required. And oftentimes employers will help support the cost of those after you've been in a role a few years, if you're interested in kind of getting a deeper knowledge in some specific areas.
I have gone through several exams, not as many as Brady. I didn't have to do 10 or 14. But when I first started, in the finance field, I think they've changed it in the 6 years since I've been working. But there was the Series 7 exam, which was just kind of your basic, how stocks, bonds, mutual funds, options work. And then I also had to pass the Series 66 exam, which was kind of a combination of 63 and 65. So there was kind of a weird mix in there. Most recently, I went through the CFP program, the Certified Financial Planner. Passed that a little over a year ago. That was about a 10-month process. But to answer the question, I think the advice that I would say is, I think start as quickly as possible. I think if there's something that interests you and you see yourself working in that career field and this is a designation or an exam that would benefit you, by all means, go for it. I think that's, something when I was an intern, I knew that I was going to be working where I was going to work. And I knew I'd have to get my Series 7 in order to, be functional at my job. But they wouldn't let me sign up for the program because I was still an intern and not a full-time employee. I went to the supply room and found somebody's textbook that was 2 years old, and I started studying. So I think that was just, I just went and grabbed the, 2013 textbook and started reading from that and kind of taught myself for a couple of months until, I became full-time and was able to take the test and passed it. But I think my advice in terms of exams is if there's something that you want to do and you see it having value and providing value for you, for any of your potential career paths, and even your employer, right? I was able to get my company to pay for my CFP exam. I went to them and said, here's why I think this will benefit me. Here's why I think it'll benefit you guys. And here's why I think it'll benefit your clients. And that went a long way. So I think if there's a potential benefit, go for it. Especially right now, we've got who knows how many months of quote unquote dead time. This is a great opportunity to go out and maybe, really ramp up your knowledge base and learn something new. So I think that's kind of the advice I'd have in terms of exams and certifications. In terms of advice to myself as a college student, I think I didn't really realize this until I was out of college. But my biggest takeaway is I felt like I was getting in the trap, especially freshman, sophomore year of college, where I was taking a class and I was studying to pass a test and studying for a grade rather than studying to help myself in a career, right? So I it felt like I was just studying and cramming and just enough to get that passing grade, take the test, and then forget about it. I think when I did, go and take the old textbook from our supply closet at work and started studying for that Series 7, that's when it hit me that, it really lit a fire, and it taught me that I'm studying for a career. I'm not studying just to pass this test, because after I pass this test, I still need to know all that information. I still need to know how to apply it. If a client asks me a question 3 years from now, I need to be able to reference this information. So I think my parting advice to a college Davis would be every test, every class you take, try to look at it from the lens of how is this going to help me in a career, or how might this help me in a career, right? I don't remember all the statistics or calculus that I took in high school, but I know that was kind of building the foundation for the mathematics classes I took later and so on. So I think that'd be my parting advice.
Excellent. Well, I am so appreciative of all three of you, Brady, Davis, Carolyn. Thank you for sharing about your career journey. For all our students, I would encourage you to connect with them on LinkedIn. They're also all mentors and professionals that you can sign up with via the Wallin Wisdom Project. So I encourage you to be checking your Moose mail and signing up for that so you can connect with them. Be sure to tune in next time, June 5th. We'll have another business session more focused on the people side with HR, marketing, and other professionals. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up. But thank you so much for the time today, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.